Okay, so we're going to watch now a video of a person performing a sit-to-stand movement that's had all their kinematic markers put on them and the ground reaction force recorded under their feet. And so on the right here, we can see the recordings of the ground reaction force in 3 dimensions, the medial lateral on the top, the anterior posterior in the middle, and the vertical on the most inferior. Then here on the left, we have the skeleton that's been superimposed on the markers. So we can see the thigh segment here, the tibia, and then the foot. And then going upward, we have the pelvis, and then the trunk and the head. So let's just watch the movement occur once, just through. Just try to see what you can see in terms of the skeleton. You can focus on the trunk movement, and then on the hip and knee movements next. Okay, so now that you've had a look at that, let's go ahead and go back and kind of walk through it a little more slowly. We're going backwards now. Okay, so essentially, as we get started, we can see here that if we focus just on the vertical ground reaction force for a minute, we can see that as the person's starting to move forward, the first thing they do is they unweight their limbs. So if we look here, this is the beginning of the video. At the very initial part, they're gonna bring their weight off of their limbs, and then after they've unweighted their limbs, they're going to start to load them very rapidly, and that's what happens here. And you can see the large blue arrows, which are the ground reaction force, increasing. And then at this point, this is just before seat off, or when the seat comes off. That's the end of the preparation phase. So the preparation phase is when they're on the seat, and then they lean forward, because we can obviously see their trunk coming forward. As they lean forward, they start to load their legs, each leg, and as they start to load the legs, we can see that the ground reaction force is increasing dramatically. And just as it almost reaches its peak, their seat starts to come off of the chair, right in here. All right, and so that's the end of the preparation phase and the beginning of the rising phase, because now they're actually going to move up. And so then quickly, after they come off the chair, they reach their peak vertical ground reaction force right here. And we can see these blue arrows are pretty big. And they exceed body weight, because here's our estimate of body weight over here to the right by quite a bit. And then as this person is a very fast sit-to-stand task, we can see as they start to rise, the ground reaction force decreases because their acceleration now exceeds gravity upward, and so their center of mass is starting to accelerate upward, which means that they'll be lighter than body weight. And so we can kind of see that start to happen here, and they go up so fast that just for a very instant, even though their feet don't come off the ground, we can see right here, they completely unweight themselves, and so for that one instant, they're accelerating almost equal to gravity. Now, because they went so fast in terms of their rise, when they relax, they actually land, and then they have kind of a sharp increase in the ground reaction force, because their heels now are landing back down on the ground. And then quickly that subsides, and then that once they reach vertical, so they reach vertical and then they kind of land. Right after that second peak, when they first reach body weight right here, that's the end of the rising phase and the beginning of the last phase of the sit-stand task, which is the stabilization phase. So for the stabilization phase, what we see is that there's normally this backward-forward sway. We can see this kind of oscillation in the ground reaction force data, the vertical force, Well, what that means is that they're not quite stable standing up yet. And so they'll rock back and forth a little bit. And we can see that happening here. It's pretty subtle, but it's still there. You can see the person's rocking back and forth after they've reached a standing position. And so not until they reach their normal, so there's a normal amount of sway forward and backward. And so not until they reach a normal forward and backward sway do we call that the end of the stabilization phase. So there's still some kind of swaying going on here. So somewhere in here we would call this the end of the stabilization phase. This the deviations in the ground reaction force that are occurring over here because the person turned their head and stepped off the plate. So essentially there's three phases. There's the preparation phase, which occurs it starts with the unweighting of the limb. So the person kind of leans back a little bit. Right there you can see them leaning back. That leaning backward is followed by a leaning forward or loading of the limbs. And then that's the end of the preparation phase when the seat comes off. Then the rising phase goes from when the seat comes off to when the person reaches body weight in an erect position again. Okay, and so that's at this second point here. And then that's the end of the rising phase, and then that's followed by the stabilization phase when the person reestablishes the normal sway that's associated with standing. And that's the sit to stand task.